Hi, I'm John from Autel. Welcome to our third part of a series on making hybrid and electric vehicle repairs easy. In today's session, we're going to talk about the auto shop needs and your personal needs when it comes to servicing electric vehicles. So it's going to have a lot to do with safety, and we're going to cover the basic tools and PPE equipment that you need when you're actually starting to service these electric drive type of vehicles. So regarding the safety part of the session here, we've said throughout parts 1 and part 2 that we definitely need the high voltage gloves. And the high voltage gloves are going to come in a nice canvas bag, and don't worry, after we go through these few PowerPoint slides, I will show you all the stuff real live. You'll definitely need the nice canvas bag set of gloves. This canvas bag set of gloves will come with a pair of cotton gloves or some glove dust, which is going to just go ahead and prevent your hands from sweating. And then it's going to come with the leather overlay gloves. And the leather overlay gloves are the ones that we talked about earlier that we said have the actual specifications on the cuff of the gloves. And those specifications on the cuff of the glove are going to tell you when the next time you need to go ahead and send them out to get them inspected. It's a 6-month interval, so when the last time it was inspected, there's going to be a date code stamped on it. It will also tell you the rating of those gloves themselves. Then it will also come with some nice leather gloves that are going to go over the rubber gloves, and those leather gloves do nothing more than protect the rubber gloves from getting punctured from any sharp, tin or sheet metal or anything along those lines. We also need some type of eye protection. So whether it's a clear face shield or some nice wraparound safety glasses, either one of those are going to be mandatory. Primarily, we should be wearing some type of eye protection in the automotive industry at all times anyways, but primarily for electric drive vehicles, it's to protect you from the electrical arc that could occur. Then we'll also need an extra layer of protection, whether it be some type of insulated apron or an insulated mat. Now, the reason why we need that is a lot of times we may have to open the hood on a vehicle, and to service something on the vehicle in the engine compartment, let's say as an example, we might have to lay over some high voltage wiring. So we could take this extra layer of protection between myself and the danger part and insulate my body from whatever the high voltage risk happens to be. Proper footwear, just like always in a regular auto repair shop, steel-toed boots and stuff like that. We're used to that already, but we want to make sure that the soles on them have the electrical rating as well. So we want to make sure that we have that as proper footwear. This other component is the fiberglass safety hook. This is something that is a huge lifesaver. So it's something that, in case the worst case scenario was to start happening, it allows somebody that's in the shop with the technician that possibly is getting electrocuted to be able to safely remove them away from that electrical shock. Remember, your muscles operate off electrical inputs, so when we are getting electrocuted, we can't let go of the actual electrification component, whatever it happens to be. So this is where the hook comes in handy. Also, anytime we're working on an electric vehicle, it's very safe practice. A lot of dealerships mandate this to warn others that there's a high voltage threat present. So with some safety cones, some safety chains, some different types of signage, just to let other people maybe that's walking through the shop at the time know that there's a high voltage risk present there. And like I said, we could have either safety cones or safety bars or safety chains, but they should all have some type of signage on them letting them know of the potential threat. A rubber mat. This one's going to be different. It's going to be much larger in size than the actual apron or the rubber mat that we talked about a couple slides ago. This is going to be used when we're actually removing a high voltage battery from a full electric drive vehicle. That's a lot of times gets bolted up to the undercarriage from underneath. It's a very large component, and it's an extra layer of safety between you and the actual earth ground. If there's any type of moisture on the grounds, maybe somebody just went ahead and washed down the shop floor or something, we want to make sure that there's alerts to that as well. The actual insulated covers, these we've talked about in part 2 of the series, where we talked about if I'm disconnecting a high voltage component, let's say the battery, or let's say the inverter, converter, or whatever it happens to be, there's going to be some exposed terminals. So even though we've powered down the system or we're operating safely, we want to go ahead and cover those exposed terminals. Worst case scenario, somebody comes by the vehicle and maybe they power the vehicle back up, not realizing that it's been disassembled in any nature, to go ahead and move it over to the next bay or something like that. This extra insulated cover over those exposed high voltage terminals adds the extra layer of safety. We also want to make sure that we have properly rated fire extinguishers. So these fire extinguishers, we want to make sure that they're the type that's designed for electrical fires. We also want to make sure that, as we shown and talked about in part 2 and part 1 of this electric series, that we have a proving meter, and this is for doing the live dead live test. This is the part that we use before we ever take off our PPE high voltage gloves. We want to make sure that that high voltage has been disabled. We never want to work on a high voltage electric drive vehicle on our own. We always want to make sure that we have a buddy system. This way, if something was to go wrong, there's somebody there that can actually call for help or use the hook that we talked about a little bit earlier to actually save your life. We want to make sure that if we're going to be servicing any high voltage component, that we go ahead and remove that high voltage threat as soon as possible. So every car has a way to do it. Sometimes it's shutting the contactors down and proving that they're actually working the way they're designed to with the proving meter. Other times there might be a high voltage disconnect. We want to make sure that we follow the manufacturer procedures. Remember, you are ultimately responsible for your safety. All it takes is a split second or an error in judgment for you to end up seriously hurt, or it could even be a fatal type of accident that occurs. So you never want to gamble with your life. You are ultimately responsible. Let's talk about some of the tools and equipment that you might need. Obviously, majority of your diagnosis, just like with internal combustion engines, is going to all center around your scan tool. Your scan tool is your window into seeing what's going on in the various high voltage circuits on the vehicle. We talked extensively about that in the second version of the class. The final version of the class, which is going to be part 4, is going to be 100% dedicated to using the scan tool, performing all the different types of tests that we need to perform, looking at the different types of data stream. I've got a lot of silver bullets that I'm going to share with you on how to diagnose these vehicles and how to interpret those data streams in part 4. So that's the next one in the series. Your scan tool that you have, the Autel EV Diagnostic Box scan tool, will have a lot of self-guided safety-related screens. In fact, when you're going into testing the high voltage battery pack, for instance, you have to manually click the box saying that you read that safety notice. It's nothing earth-shattering, obviously. Your information systems told you the same things. It's going to tell you that there's a high voltage risk present. It's going to tell you to make sure that you've gone ahead and removed that high voltage threat before you were to do the dangerous thing you're about to do. So again, the scan tool is always going to prompt you for safety-related stuff. Along with the scan tool, with its prompting for making sure that you have a basic understanding of what you're about to do, it will also give you detailed information. The detailed information is going to be stuff along the lines of where the high voltage circuitry is. So all those orange or blue colored wires. It's going to tell you what the components are, how they all interrelate to one another. So if you happen to have to change, say, the DC to DC converter, you're going to see how that actually connects to, let's say, the inverter on the vehicle, and how that connects to the high voltage battery pack. And it's going to allow you to have some better understanding of not only the electrical risks that are involved with changing out that DC to DC converter, but it's going to tell you basically where and how you can do this safely. So with other types of tools that you're going to be needed, and the rest of it is all going to be show and tell hands-on at this point. We said before that we need a milliohm meter. Now, true, you do have your regular digital voltometer can read milliohms, but it can't read them to the small, minute readings that we need to for testing those stator windings. We covered the stator winding testing in pretty great detail in part 2 of this 4-part series. So we definitely need a milliohm meter. We definitely also need what we call a megameter. And the megameter has the class 3 rating like we need for any type of system that goes up to 1,000 volts, but it also has the insulation test button on it. We need this to be able to make sure that the electrical bonding and isolation is actually working on the electric drive vehicle. The proving meter that we talked about in the slide presentation, again, this is another component, very inexpensive. This is a tool that is a lifesaver. So this tool will go ahead and make sure that once I've disabled the high voltage circuitry, I can use this along with my digital voltometer to prove out that that high voltage threat has been eliminated. So we covered the usage of this in part 2 of the series as well. Regarding the actual safety glasses, I just wanted to talk about that, whether it's a face shield or safety glasses. If you're using the safety glasses, make sure they are the wraparound style safety glasses. You don't want anything to come in on the side of your glasses. So like my regular glasses that I'm wearing now has no protection from the side. So you want to make sure that you have the wraparound type of safety glasses. We talked about the electrical hook, right? So here's the electrical hook. I can expand this handle all the way up to 10 feet, but for storage purposes, it's easier if it's not expanded at the time. But here's the insulated hook. So obviously, if some bad stuff was happening, you would be able to go ahead and hook the person that's having the electrical shock occurring, and with the fiberglass pole, be able to safely pull them away from harm. So the fiberglass hook is something that definitely I would not recommend ever trying to service, diagnose, or repair an electric drive vehicle without having one of these on site. And everybody should be well aware of where it's located. When you buy that hook, it'll come with a big yellow sign about the size of a typical stop sign that actually says rescue hook right on it. So it's very clear and easy for everybody in the shop to see. The insulated mat that we were talking about, I only brought the one that I would use. So like if I opened up the hood on a vehicle and I had to service some component, I had to lay over the high voltage components, I can go ahead and lay this mat right over it as an extra layer of protection. The other mat that we talked about in the slide presentation, that's much larger. That's about the size of a service bay, because on those types of applications, I probably have my lifting table, which is another recommended tool if you're going to be changing the high voltage batteries. I probably have my lifting table, which is a much larger version of, say, a transmission jack. I probably have that rolled underneath the vehicle, arms properly supporting some of these high voltage batteries are well over 1,000 pounds. So they're the size of the whole undercarriage of the car. And I'd be able to safely go ahead and lower that down. We didn't talk a whole lot about this in the presentation, but we want to have just a basic set of insulated hand tools. So by basic set, remember, when we're working on high voltage vehicles, our goal is to eliminate the high voltage risk as soon as possible. We want to do that because, number one, it's safer for us, but number two, at this point, we can now take off those those 3 pairs of gloves in some cases, right? And it's a lot easier to work without having 3 pairs of bulky gloves on. So by basic hand tools, basically we have some insulated screwdrivers, some insulated pliers, and then you could either have some insulated, socket set, wrench set, or in most cases, the insulated nut driver set will get you by. Because, again, if I'm removing a high voltage component from a vehicle, I've already proved out that the high voltage thread has been eliminated because I've shut down the system. I powered down the system. So these basic tools here will get you by with the majority of the work that you need to do. When we're talking about the actual high voltage gloves, just as a quick little refresher from session 2 of this, here's the canvas bag that we were talking about that the quality glove kit comes in. Notice it's got the hook, so you can hang this up. It's made so you can hang this up. The reason why it's made so you can hang it up is because there's 2 little holes in the bottom of the canvas bag. And when I install my gloves back inside the bag, I want to install them in with the cuffs facing down. That way, if there is any moisture inside the gloves from your hand sweating or whatever the case happens to be, gravity will take its toll, and it also will help circulate air in there to dry that out, so you don't go ahead and limit the usage that you have on these gloves from moisture with rubber causes dry rot. But the actual cotton gloves or glove dust, I personally prefer glove dust over the cotton gloves because cotton gloves would be the 3rd pair of gloves, right? It's hard to work in 1 pair of gloves, let alone 3 pairs. So I personally prefer the glove dust. Again, this is just something you put on your hands prior to. It's made so that you don't have any type of moisture coming from your hands. Then the actual rubber gloves, there's the actual cuff of the glove, and it actually has all the pertinent information on it that we talked about in session 2 of this training series. And it will also go ahead and give you a date the last time it was inspected. And remember, anytime you go to use these, even though you just maybe got them back from the inspection plant and they said that they're good to go, I never want to just put them on and go right to work. I always want to do a quick little in-service bay test. So the in-service bay test is I just put some air inside the gloves. I got a nice little air compressor that will actually do this for you. If you don't happen to have one of those, you can just trap some air inside the glove, roll up the cuff, and you should be able to hold air. If it starts to leak air, see if I can capture that on camera, and it's all of a sudden looking like this as opposed to what it did before, well, that means there's some type of puncture in this glove, and you'll need to go ahead and discard these gloves. Something I did not say in level 2, once these gloves have been determined to be defective, the rule of thumb is you take a pair of scissors and you cut the fingers off the gloves. Then you go ahead and throw them in the trash receptacle. The reason why you do that is everybody will know that those gloves are defective once the fingers are cut off. There isn't going to be somebody that says, hey, there's a pair of gloves in the trash can, let me take them out and start using them. It's another layer of safety at the end of the life of the gloves. Then the actual leather gloves are made to go over the actual rubber glove, and it just provides protection from rips or punctures or anything along those lines. And again, when I go ahead and put these gloves back in the bag, I hold the bag up, the cuffs of the gloves go in first so that they're at the bottom of the bag. I can go ahead and snap up the bag, and then I can hang it from a hook. Where I hang mine is on the inside of my toolbox locker. I got a nice little hook there. I just hang it right there. I can open up the locker. Remember, we said before, it's not a bad idea to have 2 sets of gloves. This way, if you're in the process of working on a vehicle and you did your little preliminary test by trapping some air in the gloves and you found them to be defective, you can just open up your second set of gloves and continue, obviously test them first, but continue to go ahead and service that vehicle. Another component that we haven't talked about, a lot of times you're going to be doing dynamic testing on an electric vehicle. So it won't be a static test. It wouldn't be like a resistance test all the time. And you might be using your lab scope. If you happen to have the Autel scan tool, one of the EV related scan tools, if it's the Ultra or if it's the 919 scan tool, you'll be able to use the scope that comes with it. But even if you're using a different brand of scope, you need something that's called a differential probe. The differential probe is needed on the scope because any electric drive vehicle uses an isolated ground, which mandates the use of the actual differential probe. Now, in theory, most of the time, you might want to have, a few of these. The reason why I say that is, remember from level 2, one of the primary reasons that I use my scope for on an electric drive vehicle is testing those 3-phase motor windings of the stator assembly. So with that said, instead of doing each phase separately, I can have my 4-channel scope hooked up and have 3 of those hooked up to one on each one of those phases. Now we also have some other components that we didn't actually have in the PowerPoint. So we did have the actual cones. Notice that the cone comes, it's got the clear marking of the warning high voltage sticker that goes right over the top of the cone. Obviously we have about 4 of these total, and this way I can put them circumferenced around the vehicle. Again, because you're the technician working on it, that there's a high voltage threat there, but anybody else, service manager walking through the shop, another technician or whatever, they may not realize that there's a high voltage risk present on that vehicle. These little caps are made so that not so much to put around the car, but they're made with 4 different types of lettering on them. So I've got 3 of the ones here that actually say danger high voltage. It's colored in orange for high alert, right? So if I happen to take a high voltage battery pack out of a vehicle, well, that high voltage battery pack will still have the high voltage threat present in it, even though it's disconnected from the car. So what I would do at that point is I would put one of these right on top of that high voltage battery pack. This is something that I use for parts. Anytime there's a high voltage risk present, I put this on top of it. This way everybody walking around the shop realizes that there's a high voltage dangerous situation present at that point. Now they also, I don't have them here easily accessible on camera, but they also have some. One is green in color and it says it's a high voltage part, but it's been deactivated, right? So for instance, if I had a DC to DC converter, well, once I take that out of the high voltage circuitry, even though it's a high voltage component, it's no way it can hurt me once it's removed from the vehicle. So I could put that out on a bench, say I'm working on it, or maybe I had to take it out to gain access to something else, or whatever the case happens to be, I could go ahead and put one of those on there. People will realize that it's a high voltage component, but there's no high voltage threat there. So there are a couple different shades of colors of these with different stickers, but I wanted to show and share the most important ones, which are the ones that alert people to the high voltage threat is still present, even though that component's removed from the vehicle. So that was the overview of the components. Now, the actual scan tool, and if you've been following along with this series, you guys know that Autel has released some EVDiag scan tools. So basically your options are, if you're buying a scan tool that maybe you didn't have one before, and you were buying either the 909EV or the MaxiSYS Ultra EV scan tool, you can go ahead and get the whole component set up, has the EV Diagnostic box, everything all together. If you're upgrading a tool, you can upgrade a 909 or a MaxiSYS Ultra scan tool with just buying the EV Diagnostic kit with the software update. You can also buy the software update for an Autel 919 scan tool. Those are the 3 scan tools that Autel has that will support our EV Diagnostic upgrade or will support the EV Diagnostic scan tool purchase for the 909 or MaxiSYS Ultra to begin with. In next month's class, we are going to be featuring all the features and benefits of the EV Diagnostic Box scan tool. So we're going to have a card hooked up. We're going to go through, hook the scan tool up the conventional way right through the OBD2 connector. We're going to talk in great detail about all the different bidirectional tests. We're going to talk about the data stream and what is most important, my go-to PIDs for electric drive vehicles in the data stream. We're going to also talk about the active test. We're going to go through all the features and benefits just like it's a regular internal combustion engine type of vehicle, but it's going to be a high voltage vehicle. But then we're also going to go through the exclusivity part that the Autel EV scan tools do, where we're going to actually hook up directly to the high voltage battery pack. And we're going to go through all the various information that it provides for us, how we use it to diagnose and figure out what's wrong with the vehicle. And then we're also going to go through any type of bidirectional tests that they have with that. Stuff along the lines of recalibrating the battery state of charge or state of health. We kind of mentioned this in some of the earlier parts of this series of the real benefit to that. So there's two benefits. Number one is it prolongs the battery life. Number two, all those missing miles that occurs on an electric drive vehicle. So when the car's brand new and you charge it up 100%, maybe you got 300 miles of range. A lot of your customers come into your shop, one of their biggest complaints is, hey, I want you to check my battery because I fully charged my vehicle and now I only have 287 miles of range, right? And that number will continuously keep dropping. So is the high voltage battery bad, yes or no? Might not be bad, might just need to be recalibrated. So we're going to talk about that feature in pretty great detail in the next series as well. So this series was the shortest class out of all of them, but it's probably arguably one of the most important parts of this series. This series of the class covers you, your safety, and you being ultimately responsible and having a better idea of what you need to keep you, your technicians, or your shop safe and profitable when working with electric vehicles. So let's go ahead and open it up for any kind of questions at this point.
Okay, so that was part 3 of our EV diagnostic series. And this one, like we said at the end of this was probably one of the most arguably important type of the seminars that we've had so far. The one that's going to keep you, your technicians, your service managers, possibly even your customers safe in some instances. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and look to see what kind of questions people have. One popular question that always comes up is, how can I see the previous parts? So the previous parts of the webinar are displayed on the Autel YouTube channel. If you are a current Autel customer, that has been provided for you with the email that was sent out that kept advertising every time we do a webinar. So you could just go to the Autel YouTube channel and you can click on session 1, session 2, and you'll be able to watch it. So that's something that I just wanted to share because, like I said, that's always a very popular question of how can I see the previous versions? You might have missed them, whatever the case happens to be. So I do have one question here. Has Autel ever thought about selling the EV tool with the safety equipment? So to answer that question, it's kind of ironic that you say that. I've been with Autel for just about a year now. And when I was first hired with Autel, that's something that I kind of brought up, that, you know, we could actually sell a complete kit. So the scan tool, I've said, and I believe it was part 1, that it's my firm belief that every auto repair shop needs to have a level 2 charger. I explained the reasons in session 1 why I feel that way. You'll see them in the next session, the final session on the EV part of things. You'll see the reasoning behind that in real life, how that can actually be beneficial for the shop and also be profitable for the shop. So that is something that I said we could package a level 2 charger. We can also package the EV diagnostic scan tool and some of the other tools and equipment that are needed. Equipment wise being the safety related stuff. So far, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Autel is going to do that. So I will share with you where I got mine from. So basically, now that you know the components that we recommended by watching this video, you can just go right on Amazon and you could type in, so let's say you're looking for those high voltage cones or those high voltage warning caps that you put on parts. You can just type that in, EV high voltage safety equipment, and you will pull up a whole bunch of pages of gloves. You could be more specific and tell it exactly what you're looking for, and then you'll get right to that area. Gloves are the most popular, which is why there's so many different vendors out there, and that's why you see so many of those if you keep the search kind of vague here. Also, any of our vendors that actually sell the Autel equipment, most of them will also sell the high voltage components. High voltage, I guess they sell the high voltage components as well if it's a parts vendor, but they'll also be able to sell you the high voltage safety equipment. So, and if they don't happen to have something in stock at the time, if you just tell them what you're looking for, I'm sure if you got a good relationship with them, maybe do a lot of business with them, they'll do everything they can to go ahead and get that for you. Okay, so it says you can buy from G2S Tobic in Canada. Yeah, so I'm from the United States, so Amazon works great for, you know, no matter where you live, but your vendors for different areas that you may live in. Obviously, I don't know all of them. I know the popular ones here in the States, but you know, for the people in Canada or in Europe or Asia or wherever you may be watching this from, you know your vendors, and like I said, you could actually just go ahead and tell them what you're looking for, and they will probably be able to. Napa is another great source. I'm seeing that in the questions there. How to work in gloves with small hands. So that's one of the most confusing parts when you buy the gloves. So unfortunately, it's not like our latex gloves that we've worn for years. If there's a really greasy, nasty job, where they come in small, medium, large, extra large, they come in an actual number size, right? So the number size, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, starts at 7, goes up to like 15. So I'm not going to lie to you. The first time I ever bought a pair of gloves, I'm like, I don't know. You know, I don't have abnormally large hands, but I don't have really small hands either. I'd like something, you know, like a size large or so. I think that would probably fit. So, but I'm dealing with numbers here. So I actually ordered a size 12, and for my hands, those were way too large. So I was able to use them for the time being, but I immediately ordered a second set. My second set was a size 9, and they fit me perfectly. So I'm kind of unique at where, since I do training, I probably have 24 pairs of those gloves, right? So I have so many pairs of gloves because in a live hands-on in-person training class, obviously anybody taking the class has to have protection. So they have a whole bunch, but my personal shop area, I have actually 3 sets. I have the set that's open that I'm using, and then I have 2 backup sets as well. And like I said, I know you don't know what size my hands are, but you know, that's the hardest part when you're buying gloves originally, is knowing which size glove to get. So if you happen to ever be someplace and maybe somebody has a pair of gloves at your place of business, you could try them on and then get a general idea if you got to go larger or smaller. Or if you ever happen to be in an in-person training class, in the in-person training class, I I don't have the size 7 because those are relatively small, but my sets go from size 8 all the way up to size 15, if I'm not mistaken. And I have a whole bunch that's right around size 9, 10. That's pretty much the most average ones here. Go ahead and click on this. Which company is leading research and development when it comes to making it better? So are we talking the scan tool? Is that the question that we're relating to? Doesn't really say. So I'm going to assume it's the scan tool. So a little bit about Autel. 60% of our revenue goes towards our own internal research and development. So that's pretty impressive. So, if we made $100, that means 60 of those dollars are getting pumped right back into research and development, not just for the EV products, but for any of our products, whether it's ADAS or battery testing or whatever, TPMS, whatever we have. And once we develop something, then we also, the members of the team, do extensive research on it before it's ever sold to the public. And we try to find if there's any kind of bugs or any kind of problems with the software, let's say, or whatever the case happens to be. We offer suggestions, and headquarters is very good about listening to not only our suggestions, but any of our customers. Then again, before it's released, we actively send samples to some well-known industry experts who actually do a review and possibly catch something that maybe the first 2 levels haven't caught. So I could bore you with a huge PowerPoint that explains how Autel operates, but any one of our products, before it goes to market to actually start being sold, has a success rate of 99.8% of the vehicles that it's been looked to. It works, it talks to, it does what it's supposed to do. That's even before we get it here as the mobile teams to do our inspections on it. So that's a big feather in our cap, how we actually do things here at Autel. Okay. The ones that, thank you to everybody that says, good job and thank you. So I just want to throw that out there. I'm not going to say that for everyone. I'm just reading them as I go here and trying to find the pertinent information in it. I already own the MaxiSYS Ultra. Can I just purchase the EV upgrade to use my diagnostic tool with these electric hybrid vehicles? The answer to that question is yes. If you already have the Ultra, or if you already have the 909, or you already have the 919, you could buy just the upgrade kit. When you get the kit, the only thing you have to do is go into settings and punch in the serial number of the EV Diagnostic box, just so the tool knows to look for it. And then once you do that, you're good to go. If you happen to have a scan tool that we did not mention, so one of the part numbers we did not mention, unfortunately, the EV Diagnostic box will not work unless you have one of those 3 models of scan tools. If you don't have a scan tool right now, we do sell the 909 and the Ultra scan tool as an EV option to purchase. So you can purchase the scan tool, and the scan tool will still do everything you're accustomed to it doing on a gasoline diesel type of application, but it will also come with the EV Diagnostic box in there. So it'll also work with the hybrids and the actual full electric drive vehicles. The benefit to our EV Diagnostic box, and the first one's out with this, is not only can we get all the information from the OBD2 connector, but we can also go directly to the battery pack. That's a huge benefit because, as you've been watching the series, you know that there's several different components inside the BMS. where if I just use the information from the OBD2 connector, so we'll just use, and as an example, the temperature. So from the OBD2 connector, it's going to average all of those temperature sensors that are located in the battery box, and you're going to get one temperature reading. However, there might be, depending on if it's a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or a full electric vehicle, there may be anywhere from 3 sensors all the way up to about 14 sensors on some of the largest electric vehicles batteries. So you're not getting an average. You can actually see the individual temperatures. You could do that with all the individual battery cells. You can see the amperage. You can see the state of charge of it. You can see the cell differences. So that's a huge benefit that we have with our EV diagnostic tools here. Scrolling through here. What exactly is the problem with the Toyota RAV4 hybrid? So not quite sure. Said with that, has Autel ever thought about selling the EV tool with the safety equipment? I already answered that one. Do I have a recommendation for an insulation meter? So I do. I don't know if I'll get fired. We don't sell one of those, so I don't think I'll get fired for giving you my opinion. There's a lot of different companies out there that have them. There's one big benefit to the one that I have. So I don't think it's a secret. If you're watching the video closely, every time I hold up a piece of equipment that Autel doesn't sell, I usually strategically place my fingers over the company brand name. But if you know tools, and you know that the one I held up was made by Fluke. So the version I have is the Fluke 1587. There's also a 1507. The 1587, the reason why I chose that one over 1507 is it offers the same other types of electrical tests such as your Fluke 87. Doesn't offer an RPM test like a Fluke 88 would, but this way I can use it for multiple stuff, right? So that's why I chose that one over 1507. The reason why I recommend Fluke is a lot of the other companies that sell them, they're cheaper. However, they leave out some of the features. So one of the features of the 1587, the Fluke brands of insulation testers, is I can use the tool to discharge a capacitor. So if I was working on a high voltage vehicle and maybe I got to remove the inverter, and maybe there's something wrong where with the resistor block or something, for those of you that have been following along the series, this will all make sense to you, and it's not draining the capacitor. Well, I don't want to have a ticking time bomb, so to speak, here of still a capacitor that's charged. So the Fluke versions of them, I can use it to discharge that capacitor safely, which is why I prefer that company over some of the other companies that are out there. They do cost a little bit more. We're talking usually about $100, $150 more than a competitor's version, and that one feature alone, in my mind, is well worth that extra money spent there. I'm going to go back to that RAV4 discussion here. Why were you wearing a ring? Just a pet peeve of mine. Well, I was wearing a ring only because you'll see in this video there was no high voltage components or no high voltage thread. However, you will see in the next part, in part 4, when we're hooked up to a live vehicle, I will not have my ring on. That's the only form of jewelry I wear ever. You will see that I don't have it on. I'm not a big necklace, watch, whatever type of guy. Wedding ring is the only thing I ever have. You will not see it, I guarantee you, when we do the live hands-on hands-on testing. Right. Would like to get a copy of parts 1 and 2, please. So we kind of mentioned where you can get that from, and especially if you're an Autel customer already, you get those emails. You get probably 2, maybe 3 emails a month that talks about, possibly software updates or these webinars. The link will be right in there. All you have to do is click the link there. If you don't happen to have that email present, maybe you saw us on LinkedIn or another source, you can just go to YouTube and search for the Autel YouTube channel, and then you'll be able to see parts 1 and 2. Will this section 3 be available for viewing like 1 and 2? It will. It's not going to be made available, say, tomorrow, but give it a little bit of time. It will be on YouTube as well. We hold back with the latest one because if we just immediately put them all on YouTube, then there's really no advantage to watching it live other than being able to ask the questions. And the questions are an important part because no matter what the webinar topic happens to be, this one is kind of life-threatening when we're talking with high voltage, but the next series of webinars that I'll be doing for Autel are going to be on the usage of scopes. So, the questions, being able to ask the questions live is kind of a big deal. The feedback and background noise, painful on the ears. Yeah, so we set this up so that everybody's microphone is muted, and I was hearing the same thing as everybody else, and it took me a little while to figure out whose microphone, for whatever reason, did not get muted. So I had to click on that to mute that microphone. So I apologize for that. The repeating of the first 5 minutes, that was a glitch. We used GoToWebinar. That was a glitch, and the video all of a sudden just stopped sharing. So I had to restart it. I'm glad it happened so early on, but I do apologize for that as well. I don't know what that was. That was a GoToWebinar thing. The system quit. Yeah. So that's what we were talking about before, and we had to restart it. I'm scrolling to see, I'm going to go back to that RAV4 question. So I don't really remember saying anything about the Toyota RAV4 hybrid, but it says, what exactly is the problem with the Toyota RAV4? So I'm just going to guess as to what we were referring to there. Certain RAV4s, the earlier models, actually did not use all Toyota parts. So they used some Tesla parts. So for instance, the onboard charging module on the early plug-in Toyota RAV4s used a Tesla onboard charging module. Now, a common silver bullet, if you want to call it that, common problem with those earlier Tesla charging modules, whether it's on a Tesla or in Toyota's case, their RAV4, is there's 2 fuses. We covered this in some of the other webinars here. There's 2 fuses in there, 250 amp fuses, and they have a tendency for one of them to blow. It blows primarily, this is speculation on my part, but if you don't stop the charge, so you got it plugged into an electric vehicle charger, if you don't go on the dash display and tell it to stop charging before you unplug your charger, then it has a tendency to pop the fuse. Now, it primarily does that with the level 2 charger because Teslas have a lock feature if you're using the actual Tesla design charger that has that cable on it without the adapter. When you're charging the vehicle, it locks that connector in, and you have to stop the charge. So either the battery has to get fully charged and it shuts itself off, or you have to go in and manually stop the charge. However, when you're using a level 2 charger and you use a little adapter that comes with it, it does not lock that in. So when you unplug that charger while it's still actively charging, that's when I found that those fuses have a tendency to blow. And if one of those 2 fuses blow, it's an easy repair. Tesla wants like $2,300 actually fix that. We covered this in one of the two sessions. I think it was maybe session one. Those fuses, I actually stock them. That's how common of a problem this is. Those fuses are about $14 a piece. You can buy them online, the exact fuses, and you can actually change those out. You still got to follow all the safety procedures of powering down the system and everything that we've been talking about. But once you've proved out that the high voltage thread is gone, it's a very simple fix on those. And compared to replacing the whole onboard charger to the tune of a couple $1,000, you know, you save your customer a lot of money there. So I'm gonna guess maybe that's what we were talking about with the high voltage. What exactly is the problem with the Toyota RAV4? I keep scrolling on because as I always start at the bottom and scroll up. But as I'm talking, sometimes there's new questions that come up here. What was the small device you said you used to test for no voltage after shutdown? So that was called a proving meter. So you can just go right into a search engine and type in the words proving meter, and you're going to come up with, you know, different companies make them. Again, mine was yellow, so you guys all know what manufacturer that was. That particular manufacturer sells two versions. I bought the more expensive version. That was a mistake on my part, right? So they're not real expensive to begin with. You could get the cheaper version for under $100. The one that I have is a little bit more than $100. The one that I bought, I figured, not really knowing the difference between them when I made the purchase, I just bought it because I said, well, it's like $30 more, so it's got to do extra stuff. What it does is something that we don't need. So my version has a protruding little bump on the front cover of it. That's the only difference between them. And that's made for like a high voltage electrician to be able to take their inductive clamp and actually clamp around that so that they can get a voltage reading. Now our equipment is not designed like that, so that's a feature I will never use on mine. So you can get by with the cheaper one that's under $100 because I bought the other one, and other than that, that's the only difference there. So again, that was called a proving meter. Keep scrolling. Cost is crazy to be wanting an EV door rate. Not quite sure what that means. So the EVs are extremely expensive. Whether you know you're a believer that EVs is the way of the future, or you hate EVs or anything along those lines, you know, I can tell you that I've been in this industry a long time, and as long as I've been in the industry, every time there's a drastically new technology that comes out, everybody hates it, myself included. Everybody hates it. Everybody's like, that's just a passing fad. It's going to go away, everything along those lines. You know, from when we did away with breaker points, nobody liked electronic ignition. When we did away with carburetors, nobody liked fuel injection. When we started computer controls, that was probably the closest thing we had to electric vehicles in my career so far. The strong hatred towards that, but it doesn't go away, right? I don't know how else to say it. So if you're in the industry as a repair technician, this is something you're going to have to deal with at some point. I don't know if you're working on them now or not, but I can guarantee you will. Now, with that being said, is it going to be only EV cars in the future? It's my belief it won't be. I believe that there's going to be some hydrogen cell type of vehicles, but they'll still use high voltage batteries. So a lot of the stuff that we're covering here with EVs, you're still going to need to know, even with the hydrogen cell batteries. So that's something that I just kind of wanted to throw out there. How to work with small size components with the gloves. So that's, like I said, it's hard, and it's hard to get used to working in the gloves to begin with. That's why my number one goal is to do what I got to do, and then go ahead and disable the high voltage threat so that I can take those gloves off and feel safe when I'm working on a vehicle. Size in hand and get the right size. Okay, so this is something I didn't know. Somebody responded to one that says most glove manufacturers will have an outline you can print out and check the size of your hand to get the right size glove. So I want to thank whoever put that on there because I didn't even know that, and I've been buying the gloves for years. How much is it to get inspected every 6 months, the gloves? So it kind of depends. There's a few different companies. I use one that's out of New Jersey. I'm from Ohio. That one has the fastest turnaround time for me. Basically, they charge me about 40 bucks. That's with the shipping, handling, and everything to go ahead and perform that. Where can we take classes for electric cars? So if I have my way, I would love to be able to do some live in-person training classes. Autel has a beautiful Autel Training Academy in our New York office. If I have my way with Autel, I would love to be able to do some live stand-up training. Prior to that, the best way to be able to get something like that would be going through your distributor. If your distributor is a big customer of Autel, Autel sells nothing to the end user. We go through a whole distributor market share. So your distributor, if they're a large company and they ask Autel to, that's going to be your best course of action of being able to get, whether it's EV related or ADAS related or whatever the case happens to be. That's going to be your best option for doing it. But also Autel goes to all the trade shows within the automotive industry. So, if you saw my travel schedule, you would ask me, well, when do you have time to do these webinars? So basically, next week I'll be in Virginia for something. The week after that, I'll be in Vegas for a Napa tool school. And then after that, we'll be at Vision. So anybody that's attending the Vision show, and also I'll be back in Vegas for the Cornwall Tool Show. So we do have a pretty active trade show schedule. And a lot of times at the trade show, we might be presenting at the trade show, somebody from the team, different topics all the time. Or you can always stop by the Autel booth and any one of us will be happy to show you stuff, live right there in the booth. All right, let's see. Trying to make sure we don't go too far over our time here. Why no EV available for the 908S? It has to do with the operating system and the memory of the scan tools. Are there certain lifts required for electric vehicles? So I'm gonna end the seminar with that question because we're about 2 minutes over, but we had to restart about 5 minutes into it. So there are some lifts that say that they're dedicated and designed for specifically for an electric drive vehicle. Here's a big thing when it comes to lifts. Obviously, a drive-on lift, for example, would not be your best choice for servicing full electric vehicles. The reason being is because those ramps are going to be in the way, and a lot of full electric drive vehicles, the battery pack is pretty much underneath, and it's about the size of the floorboard. So if you had to change the battery pack, those ramps are going to be obstructing your ability to do that. Some type of two-post lift would be the ideal one. Now, realistically, the cars are heavy because of the components, but they're not necessarily that much heavier than a V8, pickup truck. Those are pretty heavy as well. The difference between them is you might have better ground clearance on one that's dedicated towards an electric drive vehicle. However, if you bought a lift, I'd have to say within the last 5 years, pretty much a standard feature on all the lifts nowadays anyways, because the cars are getting closer and closer to the ground. So it's a great question. I'm glad I was able to see that question and talk about it a little bit, because realistically, if you probably have some of the tools already for an electric drive vehicle, if you had none of them, you know, we're not talking about $100,000 investment here. We're talking, you know, depending on the scan tool you buy, we're talking like maybe $10,000 to $15,000. And you may already have a scan tool that maybe you only need to buy the upgrade kit for the EV Diagnostic box. Then you're talking way less, because scan tools are pretty much the most expensive part of it. The second most expensive part of the tooling is probably a lifting table. So if you happen to decide you want to service the high voltage battery packs, you know, and if it's on an electric drive vehicle and it's not under warranty and you're going to take it out for whatever reason, they're rather large and rather heavy, so you're going to need a lifting table. That's probably the second most expensive. A lot of the tools that I showed here today is, you know, we're talking less than 500 bucks. Some of them are less than $100. Some of them are less than even $50, like the insulated screwdriver set. You know, that thing was less than 50 bucks. So we're not talking a huge investment there. All right, so you can always email me. I do want to throw out there and say that there was handouts. So if you're not aware of that, there's a link on GoToWebinar where you can download the PowerPoint handouts from this presentation. I want to just reference again, we do have the all hands-on version hooked up to a live electric drive vehicle using the scan tool, where I'm going to be sharing not only my go-to PIDs and how I use it to diagnose and repair vehicles and stuff, but I'm going to be sharing a lot of my silver bullets that I found with different types of electric drive vehicles in the next and final part of the EV series here. So again, I want to thank everybody for attending, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next webinar. And if you think of a question after we get off the line here today, you can always email me right through GoToWebinar, and I'll do my best to answer in a timely manner. Thanks for watching.